Today we're going to talk about landlording. Hello, my name is Bob Irwin and I'm with MB Enterprises and I recycle properties. So you've been through some of the other episodes of Recycle That House with MB Enterprises. Today we're going to talk about landlording. In specific, there is one thing that you need to know as a landlord, and you need to live by this. And we're going to talk about this to the nth degree. There are seven protected classes in fair housing with the Fed that is going to get after you, perhaps fine you, or do something even worse with regard to these seven classes. Does anybody know what those classes are? We're talking about you cannot discriminate against a particular class such as race, color, religion, sexual orientation, national origin, family status, familiar status, and handicapping or handicapped folks. If you run across any of these folks and you do not have a circumstance that you can disqualify them from being a tenant in your property, you're going to be in trouble. They can turn you in to the local authorities and you can be fined or even worse. So let's move on from there. Let's talk about once you have a habitable property, one in which folks are willing to live and willing to pay for. You determine your rent, you do your research. Perhaps you're dealing with Section 8. You can look at them as a standard for rent rates in that given area, that neighborhood. You can also do rentometer.com. It may cost you a few bucks, but the idea here is that you can determine exactly what rents are going on in that local area, in that neighborhood. You can also use local city standards. What do I mean by that? You reach out to the local housing authority of your given city, township, whatever, and they can give you an idea of what your rent standards might be. So there's three ways to determine your rent. You can use Section 8, Rentometer online, and local standards. Okay, once you have that property, are you going to go commando? Are you going to do solo? Are you going to be the property manager? Or are you going to find yourself a local property manager? If you do find a local property manager that you can interview, and you want to interview them like they're going to be a tenant. You're going to want to know what their fees are, what they're willing to do, if they have any documentation, such as applications, such as leases, things of this nature that they can help you out with. Or you're going to find your own if you go commando. What I mean by going commando is that you're going to be the manager of that given property, and you're going to be responsible for making repairs, for talking to tenants. You're not going to interface with a property manager at all. So two ways to do it. You find a property manager, you interview that property manager, you get their documentation, you find out what their fees are, so on and so forth, and you move on from there. You go commando, you find yourself a mentor. You find yourself a mentor who has done property manager, who is doing property management. When you calculate your rent, when you know that you're going to get $1,000 a month for this given property, or $500, whatever it is, that rent needs to include management fees from a property manager. It needs to include insurance, taxes. If you have a mortgage on that property, which you probably will, you're going to want to pay those things out of there as well. You're also going to need to set aside some funds, maybe 5, 7, 10%, given the property condition, for maintenance. And then of course, you're going to want to pay yourself. Always pay yourself first. Another bullet that you need to do is that build reserves ASAP. What do I mean by that? Something is going to break within the first 6 months of that tenant being in that property, whether it's a clogged up commode where a G.I. Joe has gone down a commode, something of that nature. You're going to need to get that fixed. You're going to need to get a drain fixed. You might need some electrical plugs repaired, replaced, whatever, but you're going to need to have some reserves on hand, $4,000, $5,000, $100, maybe $1,000 that you set aside to make repairs on that given property. Another thing, you're going to need to determine your rental application. On your rental application, you're going to need to have, especially if you're going commando, you're going to need the current address and the landlord, the most recent landlord information, contact information, name, address, so on and so forth. Any former addresses and former landlords. I would go at least 2 deep on landlords, and I'll tell you why in a moment. You're going to need to have employer information. You're going to want to know how long that person has been employed. You don't necessarily need to have their employer details and all that sort of stuff, but they need to show you maybe 2-3 months of check receipts and things of that nature, and have a solid employment record. You want to even talk to an employer if you can. You're going to want to need to have emergency contacts and current phone numbers for those emergency contacts. I've had colleagues that have had people die in their house and not know an emergency contact that they need to reach out to a tenant's family member or what have you. When it comes to a prospective tenant, you're going to want to know, and you're going to want to interview these people like your life depended on it, because it is your life that's dependent on it. You're looking for income, rental income from these folks, and you're going to want to know who they are, what they do, and how they live their lives. Get them to spill their guts. Have a conversation with them such that they're open to your questions. Don't ask yes and no questions, ask open-ended questions. Let them tell you how they live, where they live, and so forth. If you get the chance to visit their current residence, do it. Drive by, find a reason you need an extra signature, you meant to drop off a given piece of documentation for them, but find a way to find out how they live currently. I can't tell you how many times I put somebody into a house and, I call it the human experience. Some people don't live like you. So you want to know, especially if you're particular about this given property, you're going to want to know how they live. Are they clean? Do they have pets? Do they have guests all the time? Another thing, I would put an extra few dollars on my application fee. Let's say, for example, if folks are charging $50 for application fee, that would give them a background check, a little bit about their history, so on and so forth, making sure that the addresses that they give you on the application are the same that they have in electronic history. I would go to maybe $60 or $65 for an application fee, because if they bitch about the, excuse my language, if they moan and groan about the application fee, they're not going to pay you your rent. As I mentioned before, interview current landlords, their references. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a former neighbor, something of that nature. Interview them as well. Ask open-ended questions again, not just yes and no questions. Do you know Jane Doe? Do you know John Doe? Ask them how they live, how you know them, so on and so forth, so that you get a better feel for who these people are that's going to be living in your property. I can't tell you, I don't necessarily like tenants. I like rent. And I'm sorry, that's the way that it is. It's a business, and run it like a business. So, landlording, give your prospective tenant in advance. If you're going to meet them on Friday to sit down and go through a lease and maybe collect rent, talk about security deposits, maybe view the property, get them signed up, so on and so forth on a Friday, and you talk to them on Tuesday or Wednesday, email them, get their email address, and send them a copy of that lease in advance. Ask them to read it over. Let them know that they are going to be responsible for knowing and understanding the terms of that lease. What do I mean by the terms of that lease? Make sure that they know about extra guests. Guests can't stay anything more than a week or so. If I find out that guests been staying there for a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever the case might be, going to be a problem. If they have a pet, Find out in advance. Anything above a fish in a bowl, to me, is a pet that needs a pet fee. You can pay, or you can ask them to pay pet fees. A dog that is more than 25 to 30 pounds is probably going to be a problem, especially if the dog maybe tears up carpet. And this is a way that you can do this. When you go by, find an excuse to go by their property. If they have a pet in the house then, and it's their cousin's dog, you can expect that cousin's dog to be living in your house. A pet fee, a reasonable pet fee, will account for something like that. A non-refundable pet fee. Make sure that that pet is in a condition or the type of pet that you would have in your house that wouldn't tear things up. Your insurance guy can tell you what sort of pets they're not insurable. Things like pit bulls, German Shepherds, Dobermans, things like that, large dogs, so on and so forth. Dogs that would be considered aggressive, they may not be insured or insurable through your homeowner's insurance. And that's another thing. You got to ask them to sign up for homeowner's insurance. Get a copy of their homeowner's insurance. Let them pay that separate from your lease, and make sure that you get a copy of it and that they keep that current. Make sure that when you go through the lease that you talk about, say for instance, semi-annual inspections or annual inspections. I know with Section 8 will come over and they will inspect the property, and you can come along with them. But Section 8 standards may be less or more than your own standards. Bottom line is that make sure that you have an agreement with them on your lease for site inspections. Also, pest, bed bugs are a big one. Make sure that they understand that you don't want them bringing bed bugs into your property, and that if they do, then that's going to be a problem, and you can ask them to remediate those bugs. We know all about the German roaches and things of that nature. Make sure that that's in your lease, that they will be responsible for pest, P-E-S-T. Late fees. Make sure that you have an item in your lease that talks about late fees. I believe it's 4% in North Carolina that you can charge for late fees. Rent is due on the 1st of the month, is late on the 5th of the month, and on the 15th of the month at close of business, we're filing for eviction. So make sure that the tenant, the prospective tenant, understands this. You can even sit down when you meet with them on that Friday, read through those lines in your lease that you feel are important enough to make happen. Read through the entire lease if you so desire. Make sure that you take time to make sure that they understand your terms with regard to the property that they're going to be renting and leasing from you. Utilities. Utilities are turned on when they move into the property. They move in on the 1st, at the evening of the 30th or the 31st or the 29th, 28th, whatever day it is. The utilities, gas, water, electric, need to be in their name. If you want to create a grace period, maybe it's over the weekend, something like that, you can do so. But what I suggest is that you have them put the utilities in their name the night before or the day before, the day of, they're taking possession of that property. Appliances. If you're supplying appliances, make sure that you have photographs of those appliances, which leads me to another circumstance. Take photographs, take a video. If you went through the issue and the problems and all of those headaches to deal with contractors, let's say painters, let's say electricians, let's say plumbers, if you went through all of that to make that property habitable, to make it beautiful, to make it worth that $1,000 a month, that $500 a month, that $750, whatever the rent is, that sweat that you put in as a manager to make that happen. Take pictures, understand exactly what that property is looking like. And also, I would recommend that the tenant take a video, that they take photographs of the appliances, the way the stove is, the way the refrigerator is. If there's a window air unit, put your name and your phone number on that unit to make sure that when they move out, if and when they move out, that those appliances stay there, whatever the circumstances are. Make sure that you have it all documented, photograph-wise, so on and so forth, and save it in a file in your computer so that you know what's going on with those appliances. If they're bringing their own appliances, put that in the lease. Write a line in the lease. John Doe is bringing his own refrigerator. We are not responsible for the hookup or connection of an ice maker. He is responsible. You can give him your plumber's name to do that, but make sure that they understand that. Put your security deposit into a separate account with the address of that particular property on it. That is not your money. You're going to have to pay it back when they move out if the property is in such a circumstance, whether it's pristine and it's all, ideally it's pristine and it's all taken care of, you will be able to give them their security deposit back. If in case there's holes in the wall, the appliances were yours, the refrigerator door is lopsided, the stove window is broken out, something like that, you can account for that and you can subtract that from their security deposit once they move out. Once they're into the place, you give them a call, you make sure that they're satisfied and they're happy, and wait for the first of the month, wait for the circumstances to go by, and collect your rent and move on. I'll leave you with two truths of tenants that I ran across. The first one was a lady and her mother that came to an apartment of mine that I have for rent. 2-bedroom, 1-bath, pristine, freshly painted, hardwood floors, appliances. I'd taken pictures of everything. I was asking like $650 a month for this place. It was a nice little place. I had blinds put up. Blinds are another thing. I'll tell you, just a side note, rabbit trail, if you will. If you drive by your place 6 months after a tenant moved in and the blinds are all torn up, chances are the inside of the house is torn up. But to get back to my true story, the mother and the daughter came by. The mother came by to represent and help the daughter find a place to live. They liked it. The daughter liked it. She filled out her application. The mother scratched the check for the application fee. And I'm like, okay, this looks pretty good. So I immediately went through the process of looking for their current landlord and former landlord. Current landlord kind of gave them a good, I'd say a C+ event, made me kind of skeptical. So I called the second landlord. He didn't respond to any questions that I had, open-ended nor closed-ended. I'm not talking to you about anything. Little red flag went up. That was kind of from a C+ to almost an F. So my handyman came by to finish up some things, and I told him about Jane Doe, and she wanted to apply to rent this place from us. Told him Jane Doe's name. He's like, red flags, don't do it, bro, don't do it. So I said, okay, what's the story? He gave me some issues of violence, domestic violence going on that he knew about of this Jane Doe woman, and so forth and so on. And he gave me the address, again, of the second landlord. I go 2 landlords deep. Landlord A gave me a C+. Landlord B wouldn't tell me anything. He gave me pretty much an F. I stopped by, maybe I'm doing this wrong on a video, but I stopped by the local police station and I asked for a police report. Given time, say for instance, January 1 of 1999 till December 31st of 1999, just making up a number, and of a given address. He gave me a file about an inch thick. Maybe my fingers are too far apart to see on the camera, but The officer at the police station gave me a police report of double page of all of the circumstances that had occurred when this woman told me that she lived at the second place, Landlord B's shop. I politely called her back, says I'm turning you down due to landlord insufficient data, so on and so forth, and gave them their money back and moved on. So I won in that particular case, but because I didn't put that woman into my house. One of the things that you should put in your lease is the quiet and how shall I call it? Quiet submission of that given property. So it should remain quiet, can't disturb. It was a duplex, you can't disturb the people next door or even the people on the other side of her, whatever the case might be. So quiet enjoyment, that's the case, quiet enjoyment of this particular property. Now, the second one was a total winner. Tell people what you do, tell them again, and then tell them what you told them. I'm looking for a tenant for XYZ Main Street, and this is what the rent's gonna be. Talk to them at your local RIA, talk it up at church, talk it up to various different neighbors of which you live in, neighborhood in which you live in, or even the neighbors around the place where you're gonna rent. So I did so, and a friend of mine bought me a gentleman. He was actually homeless when I met him. She came over, my friend came over with her boss and a prospective tenant. So 3 guys came over, 2 ladies, the boss, my friend, and my prospective tenant. He liked the place. It was in very good shape. I would say it was a B+ shape. It didn't have a shower. They wanted him to have a shower. They were ladies, they liked to shower. It's all well good. I did not agree to put in a shower. They did. The employer, they felt that much about this guy that they put in a shower into my place at no cost to me. They put in a little bit of carpet, they cleaned up the place, made it A+. This guy's been in my place for 5 years and never missed a rent payment. So there's a good story about landlording and a better story about landlording. So here's the circumstance. You can recycle property. What do I mean by that? Making it green, making people comfortable in that property, helping them get a place to live, doing good while they're doing well. So, having said that, I'll wrap this up. See you in the next video, and remember, recycle that property.